Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. In just a moment, we're going to begin the funeral service of Mr. Charles E. Friedman. For those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off. And we welcome those of you who are joining us via online. Rabbi Toby Manwith and Cantor Michelle Drucker Friedman will be officiating. And at this time, the Rabbi and the Cantor are going to approach the family to approach his sister Andrea to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya, and then we'll begin the sacred funeral ceremony. So at this time, I ask Andrea to please rise as the clergy approach you to perform the ceremony of Kriya.
Adonai, l'negit ami, kimini, b'limot, l'chem smach libi, hagil k'vodi, af b'sari yishkol laveta, ki lo tazon nafshi lishol,
I have set the eternal before me. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure, for you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of your life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. We continue. Death has taken our beloved. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them. For their loved one's love that united them in life, which death cannot sever, for his companionship that was shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and the mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us ever new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain, those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and who come what may do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes, those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Adonai roli l'echsar, himno teshem yibatzeni, al mei menuchot, lo mei menuchot, If you'll join with me, please, in Psalm 23. It's in your booklet. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in the straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When the cantor and I walked forward to stand with Andrea, we said the following words: Adonai natan va'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. They're words of Job. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people were well acquainted with grief and the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. As we say now, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. I now have the very deep honor of sharing a few words about Charles, or as most of you knew him, Chuck Friedman. When I'm finished, we'll hear words from Elaine, and then from Abigail, Matt, and Bridget will come up together. Charles Friedman was born on what Jewish people of his generation often refer to as the GVS, the Great Vest Side. When he was a child, his family moved to Peterson Park, a burgeoning Jewish neighborhood on Chicago's North Side. There he attended Solomon School, followed by von Steuben. He took pride in having been kicked out of school, along with a buddy, for having questioned authority. He finished at the Central YMCA High School. It was known for second chances. Its relatively small body allowed students a greater opportunity to excel. His sister Andrea described Chuck as reliable, conscientious, and a hard worker. In listening to her talk about her brother, it became clear that he was also quite generous. When he was still in grade school, he had a paper route. He folded the papers carefully and was always on time, never missing a day. When he was 14 or 15 years old, he packed a bag and ran away from home, getting as far as a friend's house halfway down the block. When he came home, he brought his kid sister a gift, because that's what one does when they return from a trip. Chuck began college at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, but chose not to finish his studies. He came home and worked in several different fields, most often alongside friends or family. He worked with longtime friend Jerry Weinberg as a clothing sales rep, getting shelf space for work clothes in stores around Chicago. He worked in a lamp factory and brought home lamps for everyone in the family. He worked in the telephone business, running wire in office buildings. He worked with Howie, his cousin by marriage, making pizzas. His last job was working with Andrea in her law practice. He did a lot of filing and organizing, really whatever needed to be done that could be done by someone who wasn't a lawyer. He was so proud of what he and his baby sister were building together, but mostly he was proud of Andrea and happy to be around her. Chuck married Betty in 1979. They were together for round about 2 decades before they divorced, but they remained friends until Betty's death. This is another theme that came through as I was listening to Andrea, Abigail, Matt, and Bridget reminisce. If Chuck loved you at any point in his life, he loved you for his whole life, and it's clear that he was loved as well. After Chuck and Betty separated, he went to live with his mother. He was a really good son. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for many years until she moved into her retirement community. When she realized 5 years later that retirement didn't suit her, she moved back into her apartment, and Chuck moved in with Andrea, Barry, and the 3 kids. At times, while many parents on the street were working, Chuck was the only responsible adult on the block. All of the neighborhood kids would run to him. The feeling was mutual. He loved kids, especially his nieces and nephews, in whom he took a special interest. Matt remembers going on road trips with his uncle, sharing each other's music, though Chuck tired of Matt's choices first. He showed an interest in whatever he thought pleased or interested Matt. Once, on the way to a NASCAR race, they both enjoyed a stop at a cave. It's okay. So hard to be a toddler in synagogue. It's okay. Right, and his dad knows. So there you go. So once on the way to a NASCAR race, they both enjoyed a stop at a cave. So they went to caves for years to come. Matt still isn't sure if his uncle liked caves or if he simply thought that Matt liked them and followed his nephew's lead. He and Abigail had a love-hate relationship in the kitchen. She started cooking for the holidays as a teenager, and Uncle Chuck would sneak into the kitchen and pick bits of food from platters she was preparing. At first, Abigail swatted his hand away, telling him not to touch. As the years went on, it became a game involving the whole family. They would cover as Chuck went into the kitchen to pick desirable vegetables out of the salad. He would profess that he didn't really like Brussels sprouts or any of the vegetable choices offered at the table, but would invariably eat and enjoy them, giving Abigail the pleasure of winning. Of course, Chuck's love extended to all of his nieces and nephews. In addition to those already mentioned, he adored Barbara, Mark, Lynn, Stuart, Rick, Carolyn, Johanna, Alicia, and Lauren, and their respective spouses, and especially his 18 grandnieces and nephews. He enjoyed time spent with cousins Elaine, Howard, Robert, Larry, Maris, and Mark. His family told stories of the time he spent with Larry. They shared interests in comic books and science fiction. Though they both reveled in sarcasm and often needled each other, they also supported one another. When Larry was in hospice, Chuck would go visit and stay for dinner. He would tell you it was for the wonderful Polish food cooked by Larry's caregiver. Chuck would have wanted his oncologist, Dr. Kraus, to be recognized. Dr. Kraus worked hard to get Chuck immunotherapy and to find trials for which Chuck would qualify. He said that Dr. Kraus extended his shelf life long past the expected expiration date. Over the course of his treatment, Chuck became good friends with the nurses and staff involved in his care. Both Dr. Kraus and the nursing staff told Andrea they felt as though they had lost a good friend. He loved going to the casino to kick back. He liked blackjack and often won. Andrea remembers a family trip where he had won a lot. She came into the hotel room to ask to borrow some cash to buy the kids a meal, and he handed over an entire stack of bills, leaving him with only a 20. When she saw him later in the day, she wanted to make sure that he knew that he had done, that the lights and sounds of the casino hadn't muddled his thinking. He smiled, showed her the wad of cash he had won since then, and told her she could keep all that she had taken earlier, that she should use it for the kids. There were many other family trips. He traveled with family to South Carolina, Cuba, and the Bahamas. He also shared his flair for gambling with Andrea. He taught her blackjack and how to bet on the ponies. He loved the tracks at Hawthorne and Arlington. The games and the races were more fun if there were money on them. Andrea tells a story of a trip to Las Vegas for her birthday. Chuck, wanting to do something special, ordered every spa service available on the menu. Now, the staff knew that there was no way to do it all in one day, but Chuck insisted that he wanted his sister to have everything. When they arrived, and it became clear that his plan would be impossible to execute, Andrea cajoled him into having a pedicure to use some of the credit, much against his protests. When he was done, he looked at her and laughed and asked why she had never told him about pedicures in the past. His family tells me he had a great laugh. Every time he went to Vegas since that trip, he booked himself a pedicure. There's a story of world-famous violinist Itzhak Perlman and a concert he gave at Lincoln Center. Having had polio early in life, Itzhak walked using braces and crutches. He laid them down, picked up his violin, and after he had played the first few bars, one of his strings broke. The audience was silent, unsure of what might happen next. They thought it likely that the concert would be delayed while someone got the musician a new string and he repaired his instrument. Instead, Perlman closed his eyes, centered himself, and signaled to the conductor that he should start the music again. Perlman began just where he had left off. He played with concentration and fervor no one present had ever witnessed before. While he played, the audience watched as he continuously adjusted the 3 remaining strings to make new, beautiful, and haunting sounds. When the performance was over, the crowd was on their feet. When they quieted, Perlman said, "Sometimes it's the artist's task to find out how much music you can still make with what you've got left." Chuck died peacefully, surrounded by all the people he loved. The kids would often go downstairs to visit him, and he would light up as he did for each generation of children who were lucky enough to have his attention, to spend an afternoon swimming in his pool, to just be with him. He fought hard, and then, surrounded by love, he surrendered. In the in-between time, he made beautiful music with what he had left. It's now my honor to invite Elaine to speak.
Well, that was really a good story about Chuck, and for many years. This that I have here is also about my memories about my beloved cousin, and I'm certain that I'm the person here who knew him the longest. My memories go back a long way, from when he was a boy and then through the years. And I knew him as a caring, generous person who would think of others before himself. It was always a pleasure to see him. And one of my earliest memories, when Chucky was about 3.5, and I was watching him, and why, I don't remember, but I took him to his first movie at the Marlboro Theater on the West Side. And he didn't like the picture, which I don't remember, and he commanded me to turn the channel. We stayed, and he didn't complain. He was a good little boy. He was a favorite of our grandfather, and they went together, probably on the bus, to the racetrack, as you just heard, and it wasn't close by, but we were never sure if they won or lost, and but their trips were repeated many times, and he was a great help to Pa. Chucky was also our babysitter, which seemed to work out because there were no complaints from either side. Laura thought he was her uncle. He was kind to children. In later years, we took a trip to Israel with Gerald and Matt, and we got lost driving in the Galilee until Chucky found a connecting road on the map that led us to the road we needed. Some people cannot read a map. Luck was with us to have him there. When we went to Jerusalem, Chucky and I had free time together. In the old city, we went to the Holy Sepulchre and joined a line because it was there. And I appreciated that Chucky didn't complain. Then we went to the Wailing Wall and shopping, and Chucky graciously insisted on carrying my packages. Later, we went to Cuba with Andy and Barry and Diane and Dave. And Chucky then wasn't feeling really well, so I'm happy that we all had this experience together. He and I shared a cabin on the ship, and forever after, I called him my roomie. He would always chuckle. When my brother Larry became very ill, he called Chuck to stay with him every night, even though we had a caregiver. Chucky came immediately, even though it was further from his work. This was 16 years ago, and I will never forget it. These are his examples of his compassion for others. Chucky was granted extra years, and he was courageous throughout and carried on bravely. I would like to have his qualities. I will always remember my dear cousin, and I say, good night, Charles Elliott. Good night, Rumi.
Thanks. We're so glad to be together with all of you to celebrate the life of Charlie, Chucky, Chuck, Uncle Chuck, Tio Grande, or Sharky. But by any other name, he was our uncle, and he left a firm imprint on each of us. We wanted to share some of the memories and life lessons from our Uncle Chuck and why he will always be with us.
The last of those cave trips that I took with my uncle was to Carlsbad Caverns, New Mexico. We had to drive through Uncle Chuck's least favorite state, Texas, which was only redeemed by a visit to his niece Barbara and her family in Dallas. So after that experience, he was going to see every inch of cave that there was to see in New Mexico. At that time, the National Parks Service offered 9 ranger-guided cavern tours at the Carlsbad Caverns. So Uncle Chuck insisted that we do all 9. Over the 4 or 5 days that we were there, after the first couple that we did, we realized there were really only one way in and one way out of these caverns. So the 9 tours were mostly, this one goes a little bit more to the left, or that one talks a little bit more about rocks than water. So by the end, we got to the point where we could both recite the ranger's script about the importance of these caves in the early trade of bat guano in the United States. The last tour that we had to do was the Slaughter Canyon Cave tour, which had a different entrance. It also had a big red exclamation point on the trifold brochure that said, "Not suitable for visitors with heart conditions." Uncle Chuck had heart conditions. One of my earliest memories was of visiting him in the hospital after a heart attack. So I pointed that out to him, and he looked at me seriously and calmly with a twinkle in his eye and said, "If you tell your mother, I will throttle your pencil neck like Homer Simpson does to Bart." Then he checked some boxes on a waiver, and we were on our way. After a 45-minute hike up Slaughter Canyon in the New Mexico desert, we each grabbed a rope and a helmet and a headlamp and followed our guide descending into the cave. It was the most athletic thing I'd ever seen my uncle do. By the end, we were both exhausted, but we succeeded in seeing every stalagmite, stalactite, and deposit of bat guano open to the public that summer. I kept that secret for him until last week on his deathbed. I was pretty sure he had lost the ability to throttle. And I told my mom. She laughed and said, "That's so Chuck. The last time we went to Vegas together, he made a spa appointment for me and just ordered everything on the menu, more moisture than skin could possibly absorb." I feel so. He insisted that I have one of everything. So I feel so lucky to have had these trips and this time with my uncle. He insisted on squeezing every last experience out of life and on sharing it with the people that he loved. He never let details like a waiver or a heart condition get in the way.
It may be a surprise, but I've been struggling to come up with something to say and what I want to share for this moment. For me, my memories of Uncle Chuck are more a collection of experiences. I can't be touched. It won't go well. Just happen sometimes, and we're gonna go right through it. They're more a collection of experiences and feelings and less concrete stories. Something I remember from elementary school is a fun game, well, at least I thought it was fun, that I used to play with him, where I would steal his cigarettes and run away and hide them, or tease that I was going to throw them away or break them, when I was then reminded that they were very expensive and I would not do that. As a young kid, I knew I wanted to help my uncle be healthy, so like any kid, I turned it into a game. He put up with it, and sometimes he played along, but more than anything, I remember feeling like, even though I didn't change his mind, he had hurt me. Something I came to understand early on about my uncle was that it was his life, and he was going to unapologetically live it the way he wanted to. That used to ruffle my feathers sometimes, but as I got older, I eventually came to realize that his mindset also afforded him a pathway for change, when or if he decided to take it. Along the way, he did decide to quit smoking, because for a variety of reasons, that's just what he decided to do. For as long as he lived, it was his life, and he got to make his own choices. I loved that about him. For me, Uncle Chuck had the ability to amplify regular moments. When he was around, he was a good listener. Sometimes I think his primary reason for being a good listener was so he knew exactly the right thing to say to push my buttons or to goad me into further trying to prove my point. And at the end of me passionately rambling, he'd get that special twinkle in his eye, smile, and just respond with, "I love you dearly." It was classic Uncle Chuck, endearing and mildly irritating, all at the same time. I loved that about him too. As his energy declined over the last couple of months, something I didn't realize in the moment that I would feel grateful for today are the opportunities that I had to show up for him and just be there together, similar to how he had for me throughout my life. His presence made things special, and my words don't do his memory justice, but his memory will always be a blessing to me.
Bridget is always a hard act to follow, but I also want to share a collection of memories that I carry with me about Uncle Chuck. When I was little, must have been between 6 and 9-ish, I had regular sleepovers at Uncle Chuck's and Aunt Betty's on the weekends. I looked forward to escaping to his apartment and eating triple cheeseburgers and McDonald's milkshakes. I especially loved Shamrock shakes and remember the mutual excitement when they were in season. I loved playing with and cuddling his cats, whom others present might recall were not always nice to visitors, but for some reason they tolerated me. I had a special set of pink, purple, and white knockoff Legos that got to live at Uncle Chuck's, so the babies wouldn't eat them. He would also bring home mini versions of casino games like roulette and craps that he would collect as swag from his Vegas trips for me to play with at his house. We would wake up Sunday morning and go mini golfing at Novelty Golf on Devon, and he would buy me a Dr. Pepper from the vending machine next to the 9th or 10th hole. I must have been about 8 when he gave me my first blackjack strategy card and taught me to play. Since then, I've been to Vegas twice and won money at the blackjack table both times. Granted, I can only muster up the courage to play at the $5 table, but I will always love blackjack because of him. After both my trips, I remember he asked me what I did with my 16s and 17s and when I doubled down. I remember going to Arlington Racetrack with him. He taught me how to bet on horses, and he told me it was okay to pick them just because I liked their name. When he lived with us as kids, he taught us to roll a piece of lunch meat or a slice of cheese around a pickle and eat it as a snack. We dubbed these Chucky rolls, and today they're a staple in Izzy's lunchbox. As I got older and started to do more cooking for family gatherings and holidays, we had a running altercation about eating the food off the counter while I was still preparing things. Similar to Bridget's cigarette escapades, he would sneak snacks when I scolded him and told him to get out of the kitchen. He would make sure I knew there was too much green stuff in the meal and I don't eat vegetables. But he would always let me put at least a serving of veggies on his plate when we sat down. And he always ate it with a twinkle in his eye and say, well, if you made it. In recent years, I was lucky enough to be able to share my Uncle Chuck with my own kids. Even as his energy was fading, he made every effort to show up for holidays and birthdays. He had a real connection with each of them, all the way through to the last episode of Mighty Pups that he watched with Finn last weekend.
So my mom asked us to share a few words from her about her brother. He was my big brother. He kept my secrets and never, ever ratted me out. He taught me stuff. Like it was okay to read Marvel comics occasionally, but never to forget that we were a DC family. And Aquaman and Green Lantern couldn't hold a candle to Superman and Batman. He taught me that Della Street was Perry Mason's assistant and not a street name. He read The Hobbit to me and introduced me to Kurt Vonnegut. He taught me how to drive, and then he gave me his car. He gave me his credit card when I went to college and told me to use it only for emergencies, or if I needed to do something our mother wouldn't approve of, like for gas and Jack's beer when my friends and I ran out of both on our way back from Mardi Gras. He never yelled at me, even when he was hopping mad. He loved me absolutely unconditionally, and maybe the most when I was being a shithead. He was my big brother from the moment I was born, and his 9-year-old self came down the hall from his bedroom and saw me when I was just minutes old, to the moment he gave me his last piece of advice. Be kind, be calm, it's all okay. He was my big brother, and I loved him with all my heart.
The three of us scheduled a gathering to discuss what we were going to share with you all today. And as we sat down, we recognized we were sitting at a table gifted from Uncle Chuck to me, to Matt. And that's just the role that Uncle Chuck had in our lives. Always there for us, sometimes silently, but ever present. He was a smoker, a drinker, and a gambler. He lived life hard and on his own terms. His ability to be so authentically himself, to make friends wherever he went, to love us with all of his heart, and not come to all of our soccer games. That was Uncle Chuck. We love you so much. You will be so missed, and we are so grateful to have had you in our lives.
Thank you for sharing those incredibly powerful memories and for sharing of yourselves. It truly makes this, for me, a more meaningful occasion to have that further glimpse into his life. What we're going to do now is take a few moments. You've heard a great deal. Just take a few moments to yourself to think about the man who was known by so many names and so many wonderful characteristics by all of those who loved him. We'll take a moment in silent meditation. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, Grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Chuck Friedman, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. If you'll all please rise.
ברחמים, שוכן במרומים, המסעים נוכל נחמה, תחת כנפיך שכינה. ים קדושים וטהורים, כי זוהר רק היא המזהירים, ונשמע את חיים בלבל, שהלך לעולמו. והרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Rose Hill Cemetery on Ravenswood here in Chicago. The family will be together at the Friedman Runquist residence at 4310 North Walcott Avenue here in Chicago today from 1 to 5, Sunday from 12 noon to 5 p.m. Memorial contributions in his memory to the Lurie Children's Hospital. All that information is on the service folder they received upon entering the chapel. And for those of you who are joining us online, the information about Shiva and memorial contributions can be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the procession will be forming in the north parking lot. So for those of you who are going in the procession, the gentleman will give you a flag. Please put your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. Then what we'll do is the hearse and the limousine will go north on Sheridan Road, pick up the procession, and then we'll go to Rose Hill Cemetery. For those of you who are not going to the cemetery, please try to exit the parking lot sooner rather than later. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to Charles' casket. We're over here. Jerry Weinberg, Rick Cairo, Howard Ehrman, Stuart Cairo, Jimmy Bream, Gerald Levin, Steve Hutnick, and Lynn Hayes. At this time, I ask everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Charles Friedman along with the rabbi and cantor and the family from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars. At this time, we are going to stop the live stream. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please wait until the casket leaves.